Hello and welcome back to another episode of Sports Speak. I'm your host, Tanyon Loose.
I'm your co-host, Spencer Ripchik.
We're coming to you from the couple days after the NCAA Wrestling Championships, where a lot of Penn State fans were very happy with the outcome there. Obviously, Penn State Wrestling coming away with yet another national title. And me and my fellow beat partners had a really good time there. I think had quite the experience. It was really cool to witness everything that happened, and I'm happy that they'll be joining us later in today's podcast. So first ever time we're going to have wrestling guests on with us today, and I think me and Spencer are both pretty excited about that.
Yeah, it won't be me just trying to find some wrestling stuff before. I will have a whole squad on here talk about wrestling, which is pretty nice, so I can take a back seat a little bit.
Absolutely.
Let you guys talk.
Yep. But as always, with every podcast, we're going to start off with our favorite news of the week. So Spencer, why don't you go first?
So I'm going to go with some pretty big news. The Penn State athletic director, Sandy Barber, announced her retirement. I mean, it's the end of an era. Barber has been at Penn State for 5+ years, so a lot of years. Achievements that she had was the Big Ten. Penn State football won the Big Ten champ. That was pretty big. I mean, wrestling had been dominating, so that's also big. And men's soccer won their Big Ten chip. And I mean, during her tenure, Penn State's football coach, James Franklin, monster contract, making one of the highest paid coaches in college football. And the Panzer Stadium, the lacrosse stadium, also had some nice upgrades. And she had some key hires. She hired a new women's volleyball coach along with Micah Shrewsbury, the new Penn State men's basketball coach. Yeah. So yeah, and I've been looking at some potential replacements. I think it's going to be an inside job, and maybe like Scott Sidwell, he looks to be. He's been with Barber the whole time pretty much. But looking outside of Penn State, I mean, Northern Illinois' Sean Frazier apparently is a primary target for the Penn State athletic director job, and he's coached under the Badger staff, and he's also held positions at Maine, Manhattansville, Clarkson, and Merrimack.
All right, yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how people remember Barber's tenure here. We'll have to reflect on that in a couple of years, see if things have gone up and down since then. But my favorite news is not exactly Penn State news, but a former Penn State basketball player in Isaiah Brockington. He took his Cyclones team in Iowa State to the Sweet 16. They took down LSU in the first round, and then just the other night beat Wisconsin. So they're going to play Miami in the Sweet 16 for a trip to an Elite Eight, so that's both double-digit seeds there. But Brockington's had really two pretty nice games throughout the tournament, and unfortunately I'm sure Penn State would like to have him. He had 19 against LSU and 10 versus Wisconsin. That was a really low-scoring game, so 10 points, honestly, not too bad. I think that was almost a fifth of their points right there. So he's the second leading scorer on that Cyclone squad in both games, and it really makes you wonder what could have been at Penn State this season with a backcourt of maybe Brockington and Pickett. Both of them are really premier scorers in the NCAA, so it makes you wonder what really could have happened there.
Yeah, I've been watching, as a member of the basketball staff, I've been watching all these players. I mean, Brockington's just one of the Penn State players in the tournament. I mean, Jamari Wheeler but he just got knocked out. But Rossier Bolton from Gonzaga, he's also played a pretty good role. I think he had like somewhere 15 points the other night in their win over.
Interesting enough that he also went to Iowa State.
Yeah, he also, for 2 seasons, he went to Iowa State. Yeah, but I mean, Rossier, Brockington, Pickett, Seth Lundy, John Harrell, would have been interesting to see what that team did.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. But I think we're going to get right into things here and move on to our first segment, which is a team that has maybe matched Penn State wrestling in success this season. They've been pretty dominant. That's Penn State men's volleyball. So they have had they lost a couple ones early in the season after a phenomenal start, but they've really bounced back in a tremendous way. So I think we're just going to talk about our expectations for them for the rest of the season, why they've been so successful at this point, and just where this team could be in just a couple months.
Yeah, I'll start us off. I think their defense has been really good of late. I mean, the most recent game against George Mason, Penn State held George Mason just to 13 points in the second set, along with holding the Patriots to a .116 hitting percentage and only 26 kills. Against Princeton, Penn State's defense looked sharp again, only allowing Princeton a 23.9% hitting percentage, which is a little bit more than 16.6. 11.6. Other than the defense, there have been some big names emerging, and Cal Fisher and Brett Wildman. Both of them are straight killers. Literally with Fisher having a team-high 235 kills and Wildman just behind him with 230. So, yeah, I think they've been pretty solid.
Yeah, they've been very good indeed. And I think I got a couple stats here that I wanted to bring up that are just really impressive. Obviously, you have the ranking. They're now at number 2 in both the RPI and the coaches poll, which is pretty impressive for this Penn State team. And they've been near the top at times in the past, but they haven't been to this height in a little while, and they're just two votes away in the coaches poll from the number 1 spot. So they're right on the cusp there, becoming the number 1 team in the country. But looking at some of the stats they put up recently and their win streak that they're on right now, they've beaten opponents by a total of 36 sets to 4, which is just ridiculous. I mean, they're really blowing out other teams. I know some of those teams aren't the greatest, but still just giving up 4 sets, dropping 4 sets in total on that win streak there. Really impressive. They have 3 players that are hitting 500 or better right now, and Will Coons, Canyon Tuman, and Toby Ezioni, and that's really impressive right there, obviously, when you're hitting at that rate. So I think, obviously, you mentioned they have returning All-Americans and Cal Fisher and Brett Wildman, who have 288 and 274.5 points, respectively, and that's leading the team, obviously. So I think they're pretty much locks to repeat as All-Americans this year, and they could maybe even move up into that first-team line, potentially. And I think that Ezioni could definitely join them as well. There could easily be 3 to 4 All-Americans in this Penn State squad, which I don't really know if that's ever happened before.
Yeah, and if you look at the rest of their schedule, I mean, they don't really have that many great teams left in the regular season. I mean, there's New Jersey Institute of Technology, which is like 11-6, but I mean, I don't know who the heck they play. They might not play that many good teams. I mean, this win streak could carry all the way into the postseason.
It very easily could.
Yeah, they only have a couple more games. I mean, we could look at like 13. I mean, they're at 13 right now. They could get to like 15, 16 if everything goes well. So, yeah, this could be a very crazy end of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they have 6 games left till the EIVA tournament. So, I don't know if I would be a little bit worried that we could have like a Gonzaga-type scenario here where maybe they're used to beating up on some smaller teams and they ride a win streak into the tournament there, and we've seen them do well at NCAAs, like the basketball team there at Gonzaga, but they haven't been able to get it done for the national championship yet. So can Penn State kind of break that curse there and get a national championship this year? But I mean, just looking at some more stats, I think looking across the entire NCAA in general, when you look, Penn State really isn't at the top of a lot of statistical categories there, and if anything, they're outside the top 5, kind of in that 5 to 10 range in a lot of ways. But that really makes this run even more impressive to me, the fact that they don't need to be just astounding at one single thing. This team is just full of really a bunch of winners and a bunch of guys who can get it done on defense and on offense. They're hitting well, they're defending well, blocking well, have a lot of digs all across the board. There's really not many weaknesses on this roster in general, and I think that's going to make them really, really difficult to beat down the stretch.
Yeah, I feel like they're not very one-dimensional. I feel like they're leveled out. I mean, they have good offense, good defense. There's not one thing that can fall apart in this tournament coming up. But yeah, I think they're pretty in good shape looking towards the end of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at this point they're just kind of left to wait and see how they're going to stack up against a lot of those West Coast teams. I mean, that's really who they're going to have to beat. Between they got Long Beach State and USC, UCLA, Hawaii, BYU. A lot of the teams are at the top there, really on the West Coast. So it's going to be interesting to see how they stack up. I think we're going to move on to our next segment now, which is arguably everyone's favorite sport right now at the university, and that is Penn State wrestling. They are coming off a national championship, as most people expected them to get, and I'm pleased to welcome my lovely beat partners here to the podcast for the first time. So, Ben, Zach, pleased to have you.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So we collectively experienced our first NCAA Wrestling Championships this past weekend. I'm just wondering, what was your experience like, guys?
I mean, I had a great time just seeing the wrestlers walk around backstage, and from our view from the gondola, you could really see everything that was going on. Overall, I had a great experience, and obviously Penn State took it home, but just seeing all the other schools' wrestlers too, it was a great experience.
No, I thought it was great. There were a ton of fans there. The arena itself was beautiful. But just getting to see how some of the guys prepare, I thought that was cool. You know, they had the blow-up mattresses and stuff like that in between rounds, and you know, just getting to see how seriously they took it, obviously. But you know, to be able to take in the whole event was pretty special, I thought.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. Just the longevity of everything. Like, that's got to take a real toll on your body, and it makes you appreciate how difficult it is to come away with that national championship. You got to go through a lot of talented wrestlers, all of them who want it just as bad as you in most cases. And I mean, Penn State came in with 5 champions, so clearly they're doing something right as a program, and we'll get into that a little bit from now. But kind of in an effort to not have us take over this whole beat, I'm going to let our lovely moderator here, Spencer, kind of ask us some questions. So.
The proclaimed wrestling expert. Not really, but I've learned some stuff. And so my first question for you guys, all 3 of you, is do you guys think was the biggest surprise this weekend? Team and wrestler.
Personally, I think the biggest surprise wasn't on Penn State. I think it was David Carr of Iowa State getting upset in, I think, the second round to a 17 seed.
Same guy beat Berge.
Yeah, last year's national champion. I don't think anyone really expected him to lose until far into the tournament. So it was kind of surprising to see him go down early. And then I think the biggest surprise team-wise was Iowa's performance. Jaden Ironman went out early also. I think they only had one finalist.
Yep.
And
197.
yeah, Warner against Dean. But I was surprised about their lack of performance, I guess.
Sure. A lot of Penn State fans won't be too sad about that one there.
Yeah.
To say the least.
Yeah, no, I thought for me it was Keyshawn Clark. You can see him up there on the screen from UNC. He had a great showing. I think he was seeded 15 going into the tournament, so didn't expect too much from him. You know, he had Nick Lee on the podium there getting first overall, but you thought Sebastian Rivera was going to be there, Jaden Ironman. Both those guys were knocked out early. You know, he took down Ironman. So not many people had him going as high as he did, but, you know, he wrestled a great tournament and obviously finished runner-up at 141.
Yeah, law student too. So
I know.
yeah,
That was a
right
cool
into
moment.
That's
law
gotta be
classes.
tough.
That was a cool moment. I think it was. We didn't get to see it really, but it was on ESPN afterwards. I think Nick Lee offered him a job. Like his dad did, rather. I guess he runs a law firm, kind of, and he offered him a job. So that's at least a way to ease a little bit of the pain of losing a national championship. But yeah, that was when it was a cool story. Clark making the final there, but I think a lot of people expected Nick Lee to take care of business, and he went out there and certainly did that. I guess my biggest surprise of the weekend. I mean, I might honestly say Penn State, really. I mean, it's just so difficult to get 5 national champions. There's a reason it's only been done 1 or 2 times in the past before. And the fact that they went out there, all 5 of their guys executed, and just winning the team title before the finals even wrestled, I don't think anyone expected that, even the most optimistic of Penn State fans, given how Big Ten's went and how competitive you saw that Michigan was in that tournament, to go out there and just execute in almost every facet of the tournament. They really could not have had a much better performance outside of some other guys scoring a couple more points, but things went really well. And I'm going to give a little quick shout out. You said biggest team surprise, and that was Northwestern Wrestling. I don't think anyone expected them to perform the way they did all season long, and they really showed up at NCAAs and at Big Tens and really wrestled just well above what most people thought they would. So shout out for them. The Big Ten really showed up. Obviously, I think they had almost all of, I think it was just Arizona State that finished above like the top 5 Big Ten teams. And so there's a reason why everyone understands that the Big Ten is the dominant conference.
I think another surprise was Aaron Brooks over Miles Amin. I mean, Amin beat him in the Big Ten. Brooks beat him earlier in the season, but they were both close. And I think Brooks went to the third period up like 5-1.
Yeah.
It was
he looked
really
great.
a dominant performance, and over an Olympic bronze medalist. That's just really hard to do. And the final score was 5-3, but it wasn't as close as the score showed.
Reflected. He really looked like a man on a mission out there, honestly, after that Big Ten loss. He clearly was not happy about that. I mean, we could see him after the match. He just had his hood up, headphones on, head down, walking out of the arena there in Lincoln, and it clearly took a toll on him, and then he responded appropriately. And I know you wrote about that a little bit.
No, I know, you and I had discussions that Brooks would look gassed late in matches, and I thought he did in the semifinal round against Hidley. But he looked phenomenal against, he was resilient, he was persistent, he was just all over him, from the second that match started. And, like you said, 5-3, 2-point match, but it was not that close at all. I mean, he dominated him from the start, and he honestly didn't look like he worked all that hard. That's how easy he made it look.
Yeah. I think we move on.
Yeah, so now switching from surprise, what was the biggest disappointment in the tournament and in the season?
In the tournament, at least on Penn State's side, I think it has to be Drew Hildebrandt. I mean, he came in to the postseason, starting with the Big Ten tournament, I think 9-1, 5th overall rank at 125, and he just looked like a completely different wrestler ever since the Big Ten tournament started. He lost his opening 2 in the Big Tens and had to win to qualify for the NCAAs. And then he dropped his opening one.
Yep. Against Lockhaven, Snowdo.
Yeah, and got sent immediately to the consolation bracket. The 16 seed draw didn't really favor him anyway. Yeah. He would have had to face Siriano next match anyway, but he just, even in the consolation against Logan Ashton of Stanford, he only had one takedown, and that was the lowest seeded wrestler in the whole tournament. So
He's just not an offensive wrestler, and we had kind of seen that during the regular season. He'd win somewhat close matches. I think he had one pin, which was his first match, but other than that, there wasn't too much offensively, and, we always kind of expected, are we going to see more from him? And but he always got the job done, right? He got the win, which was what was important. Just come postseason, he got really exposed, with his inability to shoot and to score points. And it really caught up to him because he couldn't get anything going offensively. He'd fall behind early. And because he can't score too many points, he was just never able to come from behind. And, it didn't seem like it mattered how high the guy was seated or if he was seated in the middle or the bottom. There was just, he could never get any momentum going. And that's why he had 2 quick exits.
Yeah. I think my biggest disappointment, there's not much to pick apart here in this tournament there. I guess overall the season, you could say the Big Ten title result there. Obviously, they didn't come away with that one, but I don't think any other team really cares at this point. So I think I would say, honestly, the seeding was really the biggest disappointment for that team all season. They arguably could have won by more if they would have had some better draws there. I know Greg getting the 4 seed really kind of stunted him there. He pretty much had an unwinnable
didn't get
match. He did not get in. And Brady Berge, I know he probably didn't have the greatest tournament in the one. He probably would have liked to have done a little bit better. But getting matched up with David Carr in the second round, and he ended up losing anyways in the first round to Willits, who obviously then went on to beat David Carr. But I think if he was in a slightly different spot there, he could have had the opportunity to go a little bit farther than what he did. And ultimately it didn't end up mattering, but yeah, not too much to complain about from.
Not at all.
I feel like we're picking on Drew, but there's such a positive season. It's tough to find too much negative.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so from surprise to disappointment, you're going to meet in the middle. Who's the most improved? I know my vote is my guy Max Dean, who I've been high on all season. But good to see you guys. We'll see what you guys say.
Yeah, I agree with you on Max Dean. He's been an All-American before. He's wrestled on the big stage. But getting over the hump this year and getting his first national title to join all 4 repeats, I think that just goes to show how much he's improved. Even if it's just a little bit, it got him over the edge. It got him his first national title. And ever since he stepped on campus, he's just been a great addition to Cale Sanderson's lineup.
I think people start talking about him as a member of that group there. There's always the big 4 for Penn State when you talk about him. But I think Max Dean has really proven that he deserves to be a part of that group there, and just the way he carries himself, just really the entire season, and especially this postseason, he's just always really genuine and honest about all his experiences, and he just talked about everyone else around him and how much they've helped lift him up, and he's really talked about during his press conference that there was a point in the season where he just didn't really feel like wrestling that much anymore, he just wanted it to be over, but he came back to the coaching staff and his other wrestlers on the team. They really said they helped pick him up and get him back into it, and it clearly showed out there in the mat, coming away with a national championship.
Yeah, if I had to pick one, Dean has been a great addition to the team. He seems like a great guy in the locker room. Obviously, he's pretty dominant on the mat too, right? He's a national champ. But I might go Greg Kirkvliet. He was injured a lot of last season, so we didn't get to see too much. He was an All-American, I believe, last year. I think finished 7th. But this year, I think he progressed in terms of he beat some of the opponents that he didn't fare too well against last year, right? He beat Mason Paris twice, I believe.
Multiple times.
Twice, maybe 3.
Michigan duel,
Big Tens.
And NCAAs. They wrestled to get to that 3rd place semis.
Yeah, so we beat him 3 times. Cassiope, he had some mental lapses, I think, in the first round, tried to out-muscle the bigger guy, but I think he got him at Big Ten, or did he get him at? No, he should have got him at Big Tens, but did not.
That was the big one right there.
That was the big one that cost him.
Riding time.
Probably cost him, but I think the big issue with Greg is there seems like there's some mental lapses, but I do think now with Gable Steveson out of the picture and moving on to his future
it's
endeavors.
It's going to be a weight class to watch.
I think it's a good one to watch, but if I had to pick one to take over as the number 1 guy at heavyweight, I would pick Greg.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, and we didn't have a lot of faith, I think, in Schultz, and he showed up there, and he had a good match, honestly, against Gable in the final there, but I think it's going to be a real tight race at the top there between Cassiope, Schultz, and Greg. I think a lot of those guys have kind of surpassed Mason Paris, I think, a little bit. He's really kind of shown that he can't hang with the top guys there, but heavyweight's going to be a cool weight class to watch this year.
Especially with Greg's speed. He's just agile on the mat. He's not the biggest heavyweight, but he makes up for it in quickness.
Yeah.
He can get to the leg pretty easily.
And I think it's going to be an interesting factor to watch. Like, we were also not realizing that he was doing a lot of this injured. So I think we've still yet to feel really, or like just feel out like what he can be like out there in the mat and just really realize what his true potential is. Because Kale said he wasn't even planning on wrestling on the third day at NCAAs, and then he realized he was going to wrestle Mason Paris, who Michigan was in second place at that time, and went out there on the mat and still got pretty easy victory over the Wolverine there. And I think that he was obviously a really, really highly rated recruit coming in, and I don't think we've seen his true potential out there on the mat.
Yeah, so looking towards the future, you guys kind of touched on it a little bit. I think every Penn State fan wants to know, are they going to repeat next year, and who's the biggest challengers?
I think in order for Penn State to repeat next year, a big help would have Roman Bravo Young back. His future's obviously in question, and we attended the booster event and covered it after they won, and the fans just love him. I mean, he's an entertainer. He's quick on his feet. He's leaping over people in the season. And I don't even think he knows what he's going to do yet. He said in press conferences late August, maybe September, he'll make his decision. But if he comes back, especially for the postseason, or maybe whenever it is, second semester like Hildebrandt did, that'll be a huge factor going forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I think they're set up pretty well. I think they had some really nice recruits that they brought in this past year that redshirted that can replace some of these guys who are going to be moving on. Nick Lee's obviously a big loss. RBY could be a big loss. I mean, I don't know this, but if I had to guess, I think he comes back. I don't know. There's no reason for me to believe that, but if I had to guess, I'd say he might be back. But he certainly means a lot to this team. But you got guys like Aaron Brooks who are coming back, Max Dean's coming back. All these big-time guys outside of Nick Lee are, or at least have the option to come back. So I think they're loaded up pretty good, and I think they're set up to still be productive, but also, kind of facilitate in this next group of Penn State wrestling too. So I think, it could be a so-called rebuilding year, but they're going to be challenging, if not the favorite to win the national title, even with these younger wrestlers coming in.
Yeah, I think this is really an ideal time to be moving into
Absolutely.
the next phase of Penn State wrestling. They have some of the older guys who've been around the program for a while, like Nick Lee transitioning out, Brady Berge coming back. But I think they still have a really good base returning for next year with Starachi, Brooks, Dean, and Greg all coming back, obviously. And they've had young guys who've had a chance to get in with the program for at least 1 year, whether it's Matt Lee, who's been here for a little while. You got Facundo and Shane Van Ness, who could easily slot in the lineup. You have Bo Bartlett moving down to 141, where a lot of people think is his natural weight class. Yeah, Robbie Howard. And you have some really, really high-level recruits coming in who you never know if they could perform day one. I know a lot of people are super big on Levi Haynes. And I mean, he could really easily slot in 157 from day one. He's won college tournaments while in high school. It takes a special wrestler to do that, obviously. So I think Kale's going to find the way to get the best lineup going in, whether that's transfers. Obviously, he had to bring in Max Dean, he had to bring in Drew Hildebrandt, and it's really becoming more and more common around college wrestling. Obviously, saw Michigan go and get a guy like Pat Bruckey from Princeton, and then Suriano coming into the program there. So I think if someone makes himself available to Kale and he wants them in the lineup, he can go and get them. And I mean, Penn State is really becoming a destination for a lot of people. You've seen it time and time again. The wrestlers know that if you want to win a national championship, you come to Penn State to do it.
Yeah, I think as of right now, with the guys they have moving out, I think it almost fits perfectly with the guys that will be taking that next step and coming and joining the starting lineup, like you mentioned, right? Bo Bartlett's been wrestling at 49. He's clearly not equipped for 49, right? Just based on his physical stature. He should fit very well at 141, right? That's his natural weight. You got Levi Haynes, who can take that spot of Brady Berge. You got Facundo at 65. They are subtracting, but there's almost some addition by subtraction there. You can't replace a guy like Nick Lee, but man, they're going to be doing pretty well for themselves, I think, with these young guys.
And like you said, Kale's willingness to go in the transfer portal. I mean, Max Dean was a great addition. Drew Hildebrandt was a great addition during the regular season, 9-1. And who wouldn't want to wrestle for Kale Sanderson at this point? They've won 9 titles in 11 years. It's honestly a dynasty in wrestling. So
I think this really could be just the beginning for this program at this point.
Yeah.
So what team do you think will take them down from the top, like stop them from repeating?
I mean,
couldn't tell you, man.
Yeah, you can look to Iowa there, but they're obviously going to be kind of in their own right in a little bit of a rebuilding time. They have a lot of guys who are, older than 25 years old on that roster, really. So I think there's going to be there could be a lot of turmoil really in the wrestling world, and I think Penn State could be the one team that really cements themselves really at the top, and it's just everyone's going to be gunning for them.
Yeah, I mean, you look at a team like Michigan, right? Some people said they were deeper than Penn State. They didn't have those top-level athletes that Penn State did where they're going to be national champs, but the roster was pretty deep in that they could all wrestle really well and compete and go relatively far in whatever tournament they're in. But, those guys who can go far, like Miles Mean and Nick Suriano, they're gone. So, I mean, those are a lot of points when you're talking about team competitions or duels and tournaments. So, I mean, Michigan, again, is going to have a deep roster, but it's not going to be nowhere near the same as what they had this year.
Yeah, I'd say Iowa, just Spencer Lee coming back will be a huge return for the Hawkeyes. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, there's not many other places you can go. Missouri can be competitive. I know, obviously, you can't ever count out Oklahoma State, the legacy that program has, but I think teams are going to be hard-pressed to challenge Penn State next year.
They're definitely the team to beat.
Yeah, so, I mean, Cal Sanderson, another title. Where does he rank in the wrestling world? And we talked about it a little bit earlier, but how does this dynasty rank among, all dynasties?
In the wrestling world, Cal Sanderson, I think, is the universal number one.
At this point, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's hard to beat, like I said, 9 titles in 11 years. But overall, all of sports, you obviously have Alabama football, UCLA basketball in the 70s. I think Penn State wrestling is right up there with them. The streak they've been on since Cale's been here, what he's built, I think it's still building. Like you said, it's not even close to the end, especially with the transfer portal and everything and the high-level recruits that are coming in. I think Penn State wrestling will be here for a while and is already one of the premier dynasties in college sports.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not like they just had one good recruiting class, right, that happened to last for 4 years or something like that. I mean, this is year after year. They're having big-name guys come in, big-name recruits who perform at the highest level. And I think it's what speaks to it and why they've been so successful is because of what kind of message they give to their wrestlers, right? Max Dean said he didn't care if he won a single match just because he loved, being able to be around the team, the coaching staff, their perspective on life, how driven they are, and what kind of men they are. So I think, the person Cale is and the person, Casey Cunningham and Cody are, I think that's why this has become the dynasty that it is. It's one thing to have great recruits, but to have the coaching staff, to be able to share a message that resonates so well with young men that are these Nittany Lions. That's why it's so successful, I think.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty good place to wrap this thing up there. I think a lot of fans are going to be looking towards the future now at this point, and I think things are very, very bright for this team looking forward. So I think that's all we have for this segment, and I think we can just about wrap up our podcast in total here. So I think that's all we have for this episode. We'll be back with another episode next week.
Yeah, if you like this podcast, please subscribe to the Collegian YouTube channel, and see you next week.